From 1878 to 1968, there were 71 lake captains that called Bayview, Wisconsin, on the shore of Lake Michigan, their home. While they lived here, they captained 195 different ships, from tugboats to schooners to steamships, in voyages that took them to every one of the Great Lakes. Join us now for another episode of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, where we explore not only these captains, but also their ships, their homes, their families, and their lifetime of sailing adventures on the Great Lakes.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains. I'm your host, Doug Mintline. I'm over on Linus Street today, standing in front of what is the home, or was the home, of Captain Jacob Saveland. Now, the Saveland name you may know because that was a very famous maritime family in Milwaukee, and they set up their residence south of here in Tippecanoe. But one of those brothers, those famous Saveland brothers, lived here on Linus Street. His name was Jacob Saveland, and he was a lake captain. He captained a schooner while he lived here. He had a very interesting life, along with everyone else of that period, really. I hope you'll enjoy this video that's coming up. Bayview had a real famous Saveland family brother that lived here with us in Bayview. All of his other brothers lived in Tippecanoe. Remember, this production is brought to you by the Historic Bayview Lake Captain Society. We have a website. We have this YouTube channel. We also have books that are published that contain further details about all of our lake captains. So see you next time, and don't forget, hats off to our Bayview Lake Captains. Bye-bye.
Welcome to another installment of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, where we discuss the lives of the 71 different lake captains that once lived in Bayview, Wisconsin, during the late 19th and early 20th centuries in the age of sail and steam. This discussion will include their ships, their homes, their families, and their lifetime of sailing adventures on the Great Lakes. Here is the map of Lake Captain's homes in Bayview to show you where this episode takes place. Its location focuses primarily on the large green arrow. Today we will be discussing the life of Captain Jacob Saveland, who was a member of the most famous maritime family in Milwaukee history, possibly even Wisconsin. He and his brothers forged one of the strongest Great Lakes sailing legacies, from not only captaining ships, but also from owning most, if not all of them. Of all the legendary Savelands of Milwaukee, Jacob is the only one to have lived in Bayview. Captain Jacob S. Saveland was born in Farsland, Norway, in 1843. His parents, Thomas and Pauline, were also both Norwegian. He is one of 5 brothers, Zachariah, Edward, Theodore, and John, and they all became lake captains in Milwaukee. Their father, Thomas, who went by Tennis, was also a Milwaukee lake captain. Of these 5 Milwaukee lake captain brothers, only one, Jacob, was a Bayview lake captain. Brother Theodore lived in the town of Lake at one point, but is not confirmed in Bayview. Jacob immigrated to the USA in 1847 via New York, and became a naturalized U.S. citizen on 2 February 1899, an astonishing 52 years later. Jacob Saveland first appears in Milwaukee in 1850, age 6, living in the First Ward with his parents. Given that he immigrated in 1847, it's probable the family came directly to Milwaukee upon arrival from Norway. In 1860, the family moved to Walker's Point, likely Barclay Street, where Jacob lived for 24 years, from 1866 to 89. His only occupation for his entire life, sailing, is found from the very beginning of his working life in 1860, when he is a, quote, sailor, unquote, aged 16. Of interest, 3 years later, on 1st July 1863, at age 19, he registered for the draft during the Civil War, though it's unknown if he served. Somewhere along the way, he also acquired the nickname Jake, which he appears to have gone by most of the time thereafter. In 1866, 6 years after his entry into the sailing profession, 1 year after his possible return home from the Civil War, and now aged 22, Jake Saveland became captain of the schooner Caleb Harrison from 1866 to 67. Then, in 1869, at age 25, he became captain of the schooner Winnie Wing. The schooner Winnie Wing was owned by all of the Saveland Brothers from 1869 to 76, and Jacob is confirmed to have captained it from 1868 to 71. He may have captained it for the duration, though that is unknown. He was to captain 3 more schooners while living in Walker's Point, all owned and also sometimes captained by his brothers in one form or another: the Monitor from 1876 to 77, the J&A Stronach in 1878, and the Saveland, possibly from 1888 to 89. While these 5 ships are the only ones he is known to have captained, it's likely there were others, especially given the large number of ships documented to have been owned and operated by the Saveland family over the years. It's probable that once he became a captain in 1866, he remained so until the last few years of his life. The complete list of ships he captained, by and large, just isn't known. In 1890, Captain Jacob Saveland moved to 801 East Linus Street in Bayview. He would remain in this house for the next 23 years, until his death in 1913. While he is listed as a captain only once while living here, 1891, the rest of these years until 1909, when he is listed as a, quote, labourer, unquote, he may have still been a lake captain. That is because, with the exception of 1891, as captain, and 1909 as labourer, the rest of these years he is shown as a, quote, sailor, unquote. It was common at the time that lake captains would tell city directory and census canvassers that their occupations, though in fact they were lake captains, were sailor or seaman or pilot. Still, he could have been crew or mate on one of his 4 brothers' many schooners. But because his ships during the entire time he was in Bayview are not known, it's not possible to determine if he was indeed a captain for his other years in Bayview. Nevertheless, just the one listing for him as lake captain in 1891 while on Linus Street is enough to qualify him as one of Bayview's lake captains. The last time he is listed in the maritime profession is in 1908, working as a sailor, living at 801 East Linus Street. Then, from 1909 to 13, in his late 60s, he became a, quote, labourer, unquote, with the Alice Chalmers Company. He remained living at 801 East Linus Street until his death in 1913. Unfortunately, numerous news articles over the years report that Jacob Saveland had a drinking problem, having been arrested for public drunkenness and jailed quite a few times. On 27th December 1886, he was actually pardoned while in jail by Wisconsin Governor Jeremiah Rusk, making it the first time in Milwaukee history that a man convicted of drunkenness in Milwaukee courts was pardoned by a Wisconsin governor. Later, in June 1913, he was paroled from jail while serving a 90-day sentence for vagrancy, quote, on the condition that he abstain from intoxicants and conduct himself as a peaceable and law-abiding citizen, unquote. In his defence, it's actually surprising that there aren't more documented cases like his amongst his fellow lake captains of the time. These were extremely dangerous jobs, almost to the point where every time they went to sea, especially in the spring and fall when the weather could be especially bad, they had to wonder if they would make it home or not. And if it wasn't the weather, it was collisions at night or running aground on the rocks in fog where the surf would pound the ship to pieces. These accidents and loss of life were common in this era. Throw in the fact that there were no engines for backup on sailing ships, which Jacob captained, no GPS, no radar, nor any of the other improvements in ships and equipment over the decades that made going out on the lakes a whole lot safer, and you have a perfect cauldron of major things that could go wrong and kill you and your crew. Also to be factored in is Jacob's possible service in the Civil War. Could he have seen and experienced some terrible things there? It's entirely possible. So, before judging others, their backgrounds should be taken into account. Jacob Saveland had a tough and difficult life, for which he should be honoured. On 29th December 1869, Jacob married his wife Claudine in Milwaukee. Claudine had also been born in Norway. They moved in with Jacob's mother Pauline. Father Tennis had died in 1862, and his brother John. Jacob and Claudine had 8 children, 4 girls, Winnie, Clara, Jeannie or Jeanette, and Ethel, and 4 boys, Benjamin, Walter, Arthur, and Raymond. Miraculously, all 8 children survived childhood, a rarity for the time, when infant mortality rates were horribly high. Other Bayview lake captains in this book were not so lucky. Jacob's wife and mother to their 8 children, Claudine, died in 1909, aged 60. 4 years later, on 3rd November 1913, Captain Jacob S. Jake Saveland died when he was hit by a, quote, train, unquote, most likely a streetcar, while walking along the tracks at the foot of Washington Street in Walker's Point. He was just short of age 70. It was an ignominious end to a former lake captain. The article in November 1913 that recounted Jacob's life stated, quote, not having met with a serious accident during his long lake career was one of the facts to which he alluded with pride, unquote, and who, quote, at one time was the youngest master or captain on the Great Lakes, unquote. He was the last surviving brother of perhaps Milwaukee's most famous maritime family, lake captains all, the Savelands, and the only one of those confirmed to have lived in Bayview while a lake captain. He and Claudine are buried together at Forest Home Cemetery. Thanks for watching. This photograph isn't about Bayview or its lake captains, but it's from the same era of Great Lakes maritime history. We thought we'd close with it for enjoyment, as it captures the spirit of the era. In addition, this channel and its matching website also plan to support various maritime history projects related to Bayview's lake captains. One of these is a plaque and marker with the captains' names and addresses on it, as part of the creation of the Bayview Lake Captains Historic District, which will be the first of its kind in America. If you would like to donate to support these projects, to include this and other markers honouring Bayview's lake captains, with 100% of all donations and contributions in all forms going to support them, please consider donating to us through the listings shown next. If, for some reason, we are unable to secure these markers, then all funds donated to this site will be given as a cash donation to the museum ship SS City of Milwaukee in Manistee, Michigan. That is the only surviving intact ship, once captained by at least 2 and likely 3 different Bayview lake captains. I'm Simon Stanhope, narrator for these episodes. Join us again soon for the next chapter of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains.